Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me, and we're starting. I didn't expect this, but at least she had the decency to confess to me and not cheat on me behind her back until I caught her. I really didn't know what to say. Was I angry? Yes. Was I confused? Yes. Was I going to try to stop her? No way. George, I'm not being unreasonable. Go to a lawyer if you think it's necessary. The only thing I ask is that you continue to pay for the children's college tuition. Other than that, I don't need anything except my clothes and jewelry. I was just sitting there holding a divorce petition in my hands. I didn't open it or even look at it. What was the point of that? Linda had already taken her things out of the house, and I hadn't even noticed. I didn't say anything, but she insisted on talking incessantly. She did it when she was nervous. She tried her best to look calm and in control of herself, but the continuous stream of words pouring out of her mouth gave her away. I stared at the papers and smiled to myself. I think she noticed it and spoke faster. Getting up, I threw the envelope on the coffee table. Just get out. I got the message. Goodbye. At least she shut up. She stuttered a little when I went to the kitchen for a cold beer. Instead of finishing what she was about to say, my wife turned around and walked out the door one last time. 10 minutes later, when I was finishing the second bottle, I looked at the package she had left. According to her, everything was simple and neat. She also attached a power of attorney so that I could sell the house. We just took out a second loan to pay for the college tuition of our two sons, Robert and Glenn. If I sold the house now, I wouldn't even have enough money to pay the realtor's commission. So what was it that ended a 20-year marriage? A long-standing passion. Cameron Wright was her first. Linda and Cameron were a stable couple for many years before I met her. She has often mentioned him in the past, and several of our mutual friends have spoken out about him over the years. I ignored it. He was her old boyfriend. So what? Now I know it was more than that. I must have been sitting for quite a long time because I noticed that it was getting dark in the room. I knocked over 3 empty bottles as I reached to turn on the table lamp. Then the doorbell rang. Damn it! And who else is there? I was talking to myself. George, I just found out what she did. Billy said I should come in and see if you were okay. It was Linda's sister, Grace. I've always liked Grace. In fact, I liked her more than Linda. I must have had too much to drink and was not thinking straight. Billy was my best friend. I should have kicked my ass even for thinking that way about his wife. I shook my head as if I had water in my ears, in a futile attempt to get my logical senses in order. Grace took my hand and led me into the kitchen. I resisted a bit because she seemed to treat me like an invalid. I didn't need any damn help. The fluorescent lighting hurt my eyes, but I just squinted. How much beer did I drink? I drank about half of the coffee before I realized Grace wasn't saying anything. Are you feeling better now, George? Can we talk now? Give me a minute. I need to take a leak. By the time I got back, she had already filled the cup. So, Grace, tell me about my loving wife and Cameron Wright. When did all this happen? Your stupid son-in-law only found out about it this afternoon. Don't be too hard on yourself, George. I always thought she was still in awe of that asshole, even after you guys got married. It would have been great if you had said something 20 years ago. Be realistic. There was no way I was going to stick my nose into this. I just hoped that over the years she would forget about him. You two seemed to get along so well. Grace, it's never been as good as it seemed. Now I realize that most of the time our relationship was more platonic than romantic. I've tried and tried all these years, but I've never been able to really warm her up. Flowers, sweets, and decorations have never helped. We got along and that's it. In fact, we rarely quarreled. I think I understand why now. You hid it pretty well. Thanks. Can I get some oatmeal cookies from the box behind you? My stomach needs something. So tell me, sister-in-law, what prompted my wife to leave me? I don't know if you remember, but Cameron dropped out of high school and joined the Air Force. Right after that, you and Linda started dating. Cameron was Linda's first, if you know what I mean. I nodded and shrugged at the same time. A girl never forgets her first love. Anyway, she was very angry when he left. She wanted a family and children. I think you were the one she chose to help her with this. I thought she made the right choice. I had no idea she was just using you until the asshole came back. Hell, I don't think she even knew he was coming back. So why is he back now? He served 20 years in the Air Force and retired with the rank of major. Linda claims that he has a good pension and several good leadership positions in the district to start his second career. She told me about it, and there was really pride in her voice. She admired his magnificent military career as if she were a part of it. Honestly, George, that sounded a little unhealthy. So I assume she's living with him now? He's renting an apartment in Berkshire Heights until he can find a suitable house to buy in the area. Linda has now completely moved in with him. How long has he been back? I'm not sure, but I think it's about 3 weeks. He called her as soon as he arrived in town. So this stupid George has been a cuckold for so long? It looks like it. Sorry. Grace tried to refill my coffee cup, but I waved her away. I don't need coffee anymore. All I want right now is to take a shower and get a good night's sleep. Thanks for stopping by, Grace. Lock the door when you leave. My sister-in-law actually looked sad when I left the room. I was glad that the boys were no longer at home. It would be awkward for me to explain to them what happened. Sooner or later, they would find out anyway. But I hoped that by then, I would have regained my composure and wouldn't look so pathetic. My choice of profession was not so ambitious, but I liked my job. I was in charge of the grocery department at one of the large supermarkets in the area. The company has been trying to get me to be a manager for the last 10 years, but I didn't want long hours and a lot of responsibility. It didn't matter anymore. Early the next morning, I called my district supervisor and informed him that I was now ready to move. On the same day, I was assigned to run a new store about 15 kilometers from home. I spent 3 days on an internship in Baltimore, and then I started my job. In my spare time, I notified the boys of their marital status, put the house up for sale, and transferred all my credit cards and bank accounts. Linda's car was registered in her name, but the insurance was under my policy. The emphasis on the word was. Launching a new store took a lot of time from me. I didn't mind because it distracted me from thinking about my personal problems. Everything was pretty orderly in the company, so most of the difficulties I faced were easily solved. The corporation invited several professional employees who opened stores to stay with us for the first 2 weeks. It was a great help. They have trained most of the new store employees. Half of the staff were experienced and transferred from other stores in the area. I was satisfied with this job and my ability to do it. In the blink of an eye, everything was settled. Everything was under control and going smoothly, so I had time to attend to my personal affairs. Since I was planning to rent a small apartment next to the store, I started getting rid of everything in the house that I would no longer need. I just gave away most of it. There were several agencies in the area that were ready to take almost everything that I was ready to part with. Of course, the first thing I did was get rid of the marital bed. I got a lot of satisfaction from getting rid of the wedding and family photos. I do have a small collection of photographs of boys. Billy called and insisted that I come to his house next Sunday for a cooking class. He promised me that Linda wouldn't be there. He also wanted to bring me up to date on the status of Cameron Wright, a local war hero. It wasn't much of a cooking class. 2 teenage daughters, Billy and Grace, appeared but quickly disappeared. In fact, it was just an opportunity for Billy and me to chat. Grace spent most of the day giving us cold beers and cleaning up after what Billy had cooked. Okay, Billy, what do you know about Mr., or should I say Major Wright? All I know, George, is that he distributes in the Hall of Veterans of Foreign Wars. Cameron and Linda came a couple of times a week. He's all Tribune and Gladiator. The guys seem to understand this, but I think they're just impressed because it's new blood. Hell, most of the guys who come there are over 60. And what does my loving wife do when he loudly declares? Linda usually just stands next to him and smiles. She looks proud to be with him. She never did that when we were together. Damn it, George, you're not a great war hero. Billy couldn't help but laugh when he said that, but I didn't find it funny. George. He wears a baseball cap with the insignia of a major embroidered on the front. He even has a tag on the front of the car with this golden oak leaf. He does his best to give everyone the impression that he was a high-ranking officer. There was something wrong with Major Wright. I finished my beer just as Grace appeared with a couple of fresh bottles. Billy. Cameron didn't even graduate from high school. How did he become an officer? If I remember correctly, they canceled that old Mustang program years ago. To get an officer's rank nowadays, you need to have a degree. How did this son of a bitch get a college degree when he didn't even have the sense to get a high school diploma? That's a good question. I don't have an answer. Did he really join the Veterans Club? He joined the first week after his return. Can you get a copy of his application for admission? No problem. Why did you ask? I just want to check something. I'll bring it to you next week. Well, around that time, Grace came out and asked us to change the conversation so she could be turned on. I don't remember what we ended up talking about, but a few hours later I went home with a sly smile on my face. The next week, everything started fine. The paperwork for the divorce has begun. I had 3 serious people looking at the house, and the realtor was optimistic. Everything went smoothly at work until Thursday. When I arrived, Maria Sanchez was waiting for me in my office. Maria Sanchez was the supervisor on my harvesting team from midnight to 8. Maria was promoted and transferred to a new store from the other side of the city. All I knew about her was that she was hardworking. Everyone agreed that she deserved a promotion and a raise. If I had lost Maria, I would have had a little problem that I would not want to deal with. It was difficult to get people to work the night shift, and it was almost impossible to find good ones. I hope you're not here to complain about anything, Mrs. Sanchez. She smiled, but seemed a little nervous. I'm not really complaining, Mr. Templeton, but I need help. Go on, I'll do what I can. I have 2 sons, 15 and 16 years old. They both work part-time after school. They need to catch the school bus at 7 a.m., but they barely make it. Sometimes when I come home after 8, they're still in bed. They are not lazy, just tired. I need to run them in the morning, if you know what I mean. Do you want a salary increase so that they don't have to work? No, not at all. They work to earn money for their studies. They're both doing well at school, but I have to get them there. What do you expect from me? Help. I found it interesting that she wasn't whining. She was a serious woman who led a close-knit team, but she had problems with her own children. I laughed a little at the situation and was rewarded with a sharp response. This is not funny, Mr. Templeton. If you can't figure out how to help me, I'll just have to find another job. That's funny, Mrs. Sanchez. You lead a group of people at night who would take any chance to get out if they could. They don't do it because they work for you, and you wouldn't put up with it. How come you let 2 little boys take advantage of you? Where is their father when all this is happening? Now I've really pissed her off. She started to get up with fire in her eyes. For a second, I was afraid that I might have lost her. You're an arrogant bastard, Mr. Templeton. Everyone said you were smart and fair. It looks like they were wrong. I didn't come here to be insulted. Calm down and sit down. I have a possible solution. She sat down again, but she didn't look too happy about it. I'm going to change your work shift. You'll start at 11. This will give you time to prepare the inventory for the night crew when they arrive at 12. You will work until 6, when the first of the day shift managers arrives. He will be on duty at the end of your shift. You'll have plenty of time to get home, take your boys to school, and maybe even make them breakfast. That's good, except for one small problem. I need at least 38 scheduled hours to keep my health insurance. I can't afford to lose my insurance. She was right, but I'm not done yet. Do you go to church, Mrs. Sanchez? Damn it. Here you go again. You really know how to make a person lose their temper. What the hell does my church-going habits have to do with my job? You certainly have a temper, Mrs. Sanchez. I would appreciate it if you would calm down a bit until I'm done. And stop calling me Mrs. Sanchez. I'm not married. I suppose you also have a witty remark about this. I was getting annoyed with this woman. I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and immediately fell backwards. For a moment, I just stared at the ceiling. I was amazed at how cheap the fixtures looked. I heard her giggle as she looked over my desk. I was lying on my back like a little frog, and she was laughing softly at me. She put her hand to her mouth to hide her smile. I'm sorry. I was embarrassed by my clumsiness, and she was amused by it. It was hard for me to pull myself together when I got up. If I can't call you Mrs. Sanchez, what should I call you? Maria. Just Maria. Maria. I have 2 leaders, both Southern Baptists. None of them will be working on Sunday mornings, so eventually I'll have to find someone. I want you to work from 6 to noon on Sunday. It will give you extra hours, but it doesn't matter anyway. It's important to me. You pay extra for family health insurance. Is that true? Yes. For $80 a month, both my boys are insured too. Maria, I'm going to raise your salary. This means that your boys will automatically be covered by your insurance. It also means that you will receive another small salary increase. And it also means that I won't be eligible for overtime. Is that right? Yes. She didn't say anything for a few moments. She was an amazing woman. Her hair was dark, but not quite black. However, her eyes were as black as coal. She didn't seem to have an ounce of fat on her. In fact, she looked a little haggard. I was trying to determine what type of figure she was hiding under her work clothes when she answered. Good. I agree, but I don't know anything about being a supervisor during the day. I've never had to work with clients. Don't worry about it. I'll work the first 4 shifts with you. There's no way you can ruin everything. That's how my relationship with Maria Sanchez began. It was stressful, to say the least, and at that moment I never would have thought it would become serious. I expected her to stay for 6 hours on Sunday morning, but in the end we worked until late at night. She insisted on knowing everything she would be responsible for. I had nothing else to do, and I enjoyed her company. There was a short article in the Sunday newspaper about a fundraiser at the local chapter of the American Legion. Major Cameron Wright was photographed in full uniform next to my loving wife. I can honestly say that I've never seen her as proud as she is in this photo. You'd think she deserved the damn medals herself. I didn't talk to Billy until Monday evening. Grace called me at work and insisted that I come for spaghetti. How could I refuse? Billy had a copy of Cameron's application to join the Veterans Club, as well as a copy of his discharge papers. I told him about the photo in the Sunday newspaper, and he promised to also get me the forms from the American Legion mail. Grace accidentally heard at the beauty salon that Cameron had applied for membership in the Liberty Keys Country Club. Linda and I tried to join once, but we were refused. I didn't care, but Linda was crushed. Grace said it appeared Cameron's statement had been largely approved in advance. It's been a slow week. I had already found a small apartment and usually went there right after work and drank at least 3 bottles of beer and sometimes more. The rental price included cable TV, so I wasn't completely bored. Next week I will have an internet connection via DSL. The week ended on a positive note when I found an invitation to dinner with Maria and her 2 sons on my desk. I already had her address and phone number, but she gave them to me anyway. I felt awkward, and it could very easily be interpreted as a violation of the company's relationship policy. Just in case, I called my boss in Baltimore and explained it to him. After receiving his blessing, I felt much better about the whole situation. I bought a bottle of wine to take with me, but had no idea what to take with me for the boys. I was a little worried about meeting Maria's sons, but after they found out that I have 2 sons who are already in college, the evening became much more pleasant. Poor Maria found herself staying away from most conversations. I tried to get her involved several times, but in the end she made a face at me, as if to say that I shouldn't worry about it. She seemed pleased that I got along with Armand and Martin. The evening ended too quickly, and we didn't have time to open the wine. That Sunday, I spent about 2 hours with Maria when she started her first real shift as a supervisor. I got the feeling that she couldn't wait to see me leave so she could fly on her own. It was a good sign for me. She promised to call me if she had any problems. She also asked me to come to dinner that night. Armand and Martin mysteriously disappeared after dinner, leaving Maria and me alone. I helped her wash the dishes after dinner, and we were finally able to open that bottle of wine. The conversation was awkward at first. With the exception of dinner on Friday, everything between Maria and me was strictly professional. She looked a little crestfallen when I explained to her that our relationship could cause problems, but quickly mentioned that she was sure it was a small thing that would not be difficult for me to solve. Although I didn't bring up the subject, Maria must have felt the need to explain her marital status. She lived with the boy's father in Tucson, and one day he just disappeared. She lived there for 3 years, but he never returned. Her brother worked as a bricklayer in the Philadelphia area and convinced her to move in with him and his family. Eventually, she got her own place and has been working to improve the boys' lives ever since. She has never been married. As soon as I finished my story about marital grief, the bottle of wine was empty. Even though the topics of conversation were disgusting, I still enjoyed the time I spent with Maria. We stretched out the evening for several hours, so drinking wine was not a problem when it was time for me to go home. For a few days, everything was pretty normal, both at work and in my personal life. One evening, Billy came to me with information from the Imagicap website. We had a couple of beers and tried to figure out what to do, now that we had the whole backstory. A few bottles of beer turned out to be too many, and Grace eventually came to pick up her drunken husband. I was late for work the next morning, but no one complained because I was the boss and I usually came early. Friday morning brought another unexpected surprise. 3 vice presidents of the company came. They took a cursory walk around the store, but it all seemed a little fake. Everything became much clearer when we took a break for lunch. Obviously, there was an acute shortage of managers in supermarkets, or so it seemed to me. Even before the dinner was over, I was offered the position of regional supervisor responsible for 6 stores within a radius of 50 kilometers. The salary and benefits associated with this position were more than I could ever have imagined. Of course, I agreed. My deputy in the store was also pleasantly surprised when I handed over all the cases to him. I left him with the only request: don't mess with Maria. He winked at me and I smiled to show that we were on the same page. Maria, of course, was unhappy when she saw me leave the store, but she was pleased that I got a promotion. I invited her to a delicious dinner, which I think can be called our first real date. The boys were thrilled that we spent the evening together. It was also the first time I saw her dressed and tidied up. She was amazing. She seemed to take my promotion a little better when I told her that I would still work and live in the immediate vicinity. On the other hand, she didn't like to hear that I had to go to Baltimore for 2 weeks of study. I had lunch with Billy and Grace on Sunday. We celebrated my good fortune and I tried my best not to drink. That evening, I planned to make a short trip to Maryland to be fresh for my first day of training. Billy wanted to know what I planned to do with Cameron and Linda. I told him that it would have to wait until I was done and settled into my new position. Maria and I talked on the phone every day and sometimes twice. I felt like a teenager. She asked me about all the training sessions, and I made her tell me what was going on in the store. I always asked her about boys. She seemed to appreciate the fact that I was interested in them. There are a lot of responsibilities in my new job that I didn't expect. Participation in the life of the community was important. I was expected to join as many civic and community organizations as possible, including the local country club. I smiled when I was informed that my position in the company guarantees me recognition almost everywhere I turn. Life was good. The first weekend I went home and saw Maria twice. I got my first kiss, but I felt a little awkward since technically I was still married. She hesitantly asked me about the kiss and laughed a little at my explanation. She teased me a little bit, and I think she liked it. I know I liked it. The company rented a small office in one of the local business complexes and fully equipped it, including a secretary. They had done this before, and it was noticeable. I was ready to start full-time work on the very first day. On my desk, among other things, was my application for full membership in the Liberty Keys Country Club. All I had to do was sign it and pick up my membership card. I decided that this would be the first thing. I was wearing a new suit and I was driving my new company car. Everything was wonderful. I strutted into the lobby of the club until I saw Linda. She was standing with several other ladies dressed in a cute little tennis suit. I didn't even know she played tennis. Suddenly, the pain and humiliation of what she had done to me returned. I lost my swagger and self-confidence just by seeing her. Unnoticed, I tried to walk past the group. Everything was working fine until I heard one of the ladies ask, "Didn't your husband just come in?" I didn't turn around. There was a low murmur as I handed the clerk my form. He disappeared into the back room while I stood waiting for something unpleasant to happen. I knew this was going to happen. It would have been nice to prepare a witty quip, but my mind was empty. "George, what are you doing here? It's just for the participants, you know? You're not going to try to join again, are you?" I really wanted to embarrass her in front of her new friends, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. "Hi, Linda, you look good. A beautiful outfit. Is it new? I didn't know that you play tennis." I was babbling something. I wanted to be smart and witty, but it just wasn't there. A string of silly statements was a good indicator of how nervous I was. That in itself was awkward. "I'm taking lessons, George. I've always wanted to play tennis, but we've never been able to afford it." All I could do was smile. "You really shouldn't be here, George. I'm very uncomfortable. It's members only, you know." I was still smiling when the clerk returned to the counter. "Here you are, Mr. Templeton. Your membership card, locker key, and a copy of the club rules. Welcome to the Liberty Keys County Club, sir." I silently nodded my thanks to him and turned to leave. Linda stood there with a confused expression on her face. I grinned and said nothing more as I walked back through the lobby of the club. As I walked out the door, I wanted to turn around to see what she was doing, but I resisted the urge. I was smiling all the way back to the office. That evening, I invited Maria to have dinner at the Red Lobster. I had no intention of gloating, but I took great pleasure in telling her about my meeting with Linda earlier. There was no wine for dinner because my guest had to be at work by 11. We had a little laugh about this situation. Maria promised to join me at the club for a late lunch on Sunday after her shift ends. I found myself hoping that we would run into Cameron and Linda. The rest of the week until Friday went smoothly. Helen, my new secretary, who by this time already knew about my family problems, was smiling when I entered the office. There was a local newspaper on my desk, and on the front page was a picture of Cameron Wright in handcuffs being put into a plain black car. Cameron did not realize that the heads of the American Legion were checking their candidates to make sure that unworthy veterans did not get to them. He did retire from the Air Force, however, with the rank of technical sergeant, not major. The fact that he was wearing medals that had never been awarded to him should have caused him even more grief. They called it stolen valor, and they didn't take it lightly. I had a strange feeling that Cameron Wright would quickly lose face in his hometown. Helen brought me a cup of coffee and told me it was okay to smile. It made her smile. About an hour later, the realtor called me and informed me that the house was sold. The closure was scheduled in 2 weeks. Just when I thought it couldn't get any better, my final divorce papers arrived in the mail. Good old Cameron pulled some strings with some of his new friends and completed the paperwork faster than usual. I didn't think they were friends anymore. The day and the week were coming to an end. Billy stopped by to see my new office, but what he really wanted to tell me was that Linda had moved in with him and Grace. He wasn't home yet, so the only information he had was what he got on the phone when Grace called him. He wasn't thrilled with his new guest, but he was thrilled with what had happened. Billy didn't put up any resistance when I took him to the local bar on the corner to celebrate while I was treating. I called Maria at home before she left for work and told her the good news. I think she was in the same high spirits as me. Billy came and dragged me out of bed on Saturday. He knew how to control himself better than I did. We went to a cafe to have a buffet breakfast and drink much-needed coffee. While we were eating, I got the latest news about the situation with my ex-wife. Her car was returned to the store. It looked like Cameron was more than willing to pay for Linda, but the checks were worthless. She didn't even know about it until they came and took her away. Obviously, he took care of everything else in the same way. I do not know how long he expected to get away with it, but he probably beat a lot of people at snooker before he was caught. Grace told Linda that she could stay for a week, and only for 1 week. Linda had no idea where she was going to go or what she was going to do. The little money she had when she left me seems to have disappeared too. Maria was sound asleep in bed by this time, but Armand and Martin were ready and willing to try their hand at the Liberty Golf Course. Maria was on her feet when we got home and gave us a good lecture on how not to have fun without her. We ordered pizza and got a pay-per-view movie. Yes, life was good. On Sunday morning, Maria and I had a nice brunch at a local club. I was hoping to show it off to Linda and Cameron, but they never showed up. There were a few glances in our direction, and I noticed a few comments, but overall, everything was great. It was the first of many upcoming brunches. Linda moved out of Billy and Grace's house for the rest of the week into a small furnished apartment. Grace and Linda kept in touch, but they weren't as close as they used to be, even though they were sisters. Robert and Glenn came home for our wedding 3 months later. They played a good joke on me because I had to go and find 2 new guys to replace them. The 4 guys found a common language, and it made Maria and me happy. Robert and Glenn never mentioned Linda. I didn't intentionally avoid talking about her, but it just never seemed to come up. I do not know if they stopped by to see her before returning to school or not. Billy was my best man, but he was more of a witness than anyone else, since it was just a civil ceremony. Maria stopped working before the wedding. I insisted that Armand and Martin quit too so they could focus on their studies. None of them complained. Although I didn't make any money selling the old house, I was still able to buy a new one without any problems. 2 months after the wedding, Maria and I were shopping for Christmas at the store when we saw Linda. She worked at the customer service desk at the front of the store, dressed in a uniform, khaki trousers and a red shirt. She seemed to have lost weight. She looked up and noticed that Maria and I were looking in her direction. We watched as she turned and entered the office behind the counter. It was not our intention to embarrass her. She's been through enough. Maria and I left the store and have been shopping elsewhere ever since. Cameron Wright just disappeared. After he was arrested and charged, he was simply taken away and we never heard from him again. Robert and Glenn came home for Christmas to a new home. The big festive surprise was the arrival of Linda. Maria invited her without telling me. An awkward situation arose for a few moments. At first I was annoyed, but then I realized that it was a very noble and brave step on Maria's part. Confrontation was necessary for all of us to come to an end. I never forgave Linda for what she did, but just knowing that she was aware of what she had lost made the situation better.